Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast aimed at intermediate to advanced level English learners. On February 1st, the military of Myanmar staged a coup and took control of the country. They arrested elected leaders, including the famous Aung San Suu Kyi, and there are worries that they will damage Myanmar's democracy. In this episode, we'll look at what happened, why it happened, and what will happen in the future. But first, why not follow the Thinking in English Instagram page? Thinking in English podcast, or the link is in the description. And you definitely should look at our blog, thinkinginenglish.blog, for all of our transcripts and bonus content. Here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written list is available in the description of the podcast and also on our blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. Independence. Independence. Independence is freedom from being governed or ruled by another country. For example, Mexico gained its independence from Spain in 1821. Coup. Coup. A coup or coup d'etat is a sudden, illegal, often violent taking of government power, especially by part of an army. For example, the military took control in a coup. To restore. To restore. This means to return something or someone to an earlier good condition or position. For example, after a week in bed, she was fully restored to health. Allegation. Allegation. An allegation is a statement made without giving proof that someone has done something wrong or illegal. For example, allegations the president was receiving money from criminals have caused a scandal. To file. To file. To officially record something, especially in a law court. For example, the police filed charges against the two suspects. Fraudulent. Fraudulent. If something is fraudulent, it is dishonest or illegal, or intended to deceive. For example, the company was fined for fraudulent advertising. To threaten. To threaten. This means to tell someone that you will hurt or harm him or her, especially if the person does not do something in particular. For instance, they threatened to drop him from the team if he didn't come to practice. Straightforward. Straightforward. If something is straightforward, it is easy to understand or simple. For example, just follow the signs to London. It's very straightforward. Sanction. Sanction. A sanction is an official order, such as the stopping of trade, that is taken against a country in order to make it obey international law. For instance, many nations have imposed sanctions on the country because of its attacks on its own people. Earlier this week, the Southeast Asian country of Myanmar became headline news around the world. On February 1st, the military of Myanmar, also known as Burma, took full control of the government after arresting the nation's leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, and other senior members of her National League for Democracy. In this episode, we will look at what is happening in Myanmar, why it happened, and what the future holds for the country. Before that, I think it is useful to have some background information. Myanmar is in Southeast Asia and neighbours Thailand, Laos, Bangladesh, China, and India. It has a population of about 54 million, most of whom are Burmese speakers, although other languages are also spoken. The biggest city in the country is Yangon or Rangoon, but the capital is Nay Pyi Tae. Sorry, my pronunciation is probably very bad there. The national religion is Buddhism, and there are many ethnic groups in the country, including the Rohingya Muslims. The country gained independence from Britain in 1948, but from 1962 it was ruled by the armed forces until 2011, when a new government led by Aung San Suu Kyi began to introduce civilian rule and democracy. Interestingly, the country has two different commonly used names, Burma and Myanmar. It was called Burma for many years, after its majority ethnic group. However, the ruling military changed its name in English to Myanmar in 1989. In the Burmese language, Myanmar is actually the more formal version of the word Burma. Some countries, including the UK, initially refused to use the new name as a way of protesting against the military regime. As the country moved towards democracy, the use of Myanmar became increasingly common, although the US still uses Burma. What happened on February 1st? In simplest terms, the military of Myanmar is now back in charge of the country. The armed forces were in complete control of Myanmar for over 50 years until 2011. Early in the morning of February 1st, the military launched a coup against the nation's most popular political party and the former Nobel Peace Prize winner who leads it. Aung San Suu Kyi became world famous in the 1990s for campaigning to restore democracy to Myanmar. And because of this, she spent many years in detention after calling for reform and free elections. In fact, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991. In 2015, she led the NLD to victory in Myanmar's first open election in 25 years. However, Miss Suu Kyi's international reputation has suffered enormously due to Myanmar's treatment of the Rohingya minority. The country considers Rohingya to be illegal immigrants and denies them citizenship. Many senior government officials have been arrested and their locations are currently unknown. The military then announced on TV that it would stay in power for 1 year. It's unknown what will happen after 12 months, although many experts suspect the military will stay in charge beyond that. It took control following a general election, which Miss Suu Kyi's party won by a landslide. The armed forces had supported the opposition and demanded a rerun of the vote after the loss because of what they called widespread fraud. However, after the election commission said there was no evidence to support their allegations, the military staged the coup before the parliament could reopen. Several charges have been filed against Miss Suu Kyi, including breaking import and export laws and possession of unlawful communication devices. Many other NLD officials have also been detained. Power has now been handed over to the commander-in-chief of the military, who has long held significant political influence and successfully maintained power over Myanmar's military, even as the country moved towards democracy. The military has also replaced ministers and deputies, including finance, health, the interior, and foreign affairs. Well, why did the coup happen? Well, there have been signs for a while. I've already mentioned the coup was in reaction to the election. The military immediately claimed that the elections were fraudulent, and they demanded a new military-supervised election. They actually filed over 200 complaints and took the case to the Supreme Court. Does this remind you of another recent situation? Maybe Donald Trump? The military then threatened to take action if they weren't listened to. The new parliament was supposed to begin earlier this week, and the first action of that parliament would be to confirm the election results. So the military finally took action before that could happen. This looks quite straightforward at first sight. Aung San Suu Kyi and her party were getting more and more popular, and this was giving them increasing power. Instead of letting this happen and allowing the pro-democracy movement to get stronger, the military stopped it before they lost all of their influence. This is probably the main reason, but there could be some other factors behind their decision. For instance, Myanmar's constitution was written in 2008, while they were still under military control. However, in recent years, Ms. Suu Kyi and her allies have used the constitution to limit the influence of the military. By taking over the country through a coup, the military can write a new constitution which will give them power and weaken democracy. Another factor is that the military could have been surprised how successful and popular Suu Kyi is. Armed forces in Myanmar normally live away from normal citizens and have their own schools, hospitals, and TV stations. Because of this, they might have not believed that the opposition was actually popular. Or maybe they didn't know how popular the opposition was. The leaders of the military also believe that they belong to a highly respected and loved organization. The fact that they lost the election probably insulted them and frustrated them. Although the Rohingya Muslim minority has been a major issue in international news for the last 2 years, it is unlikely that this is one of the reasons for the coup. This is because the military actually supports Aung San Suu Kyi in this regard. And this is one of the reasons why Miss Suu Kyi is so popular in Myanmar. So what will happen in the future? Well, I don't think anyone knows the answer to this. The military will keep control of the country for at least a year, and it seems likely they will try to keep control for even longer. They will also try to rewrite the constitution and Myanmar's political system. By rewriting the constitution, they will be able to weaken democracy and make sure that the military remains central to Myanmar's political power. Aung San Suu Kyi and her political allies could be imprisoned for their accused crimes. The last time Myanmar was controlled by the military, many countries and international organizations had large sanctions on the country. The US has actually already suggested they will reintroduce these sanctions. Perhaps we will return completely to the pre-2011 era, with the pro-democracy movement weakened and its leaders detained, and the military in full control of the country, but under international sanctions. So here is today's final thought. Today's episode has had a lot of information. Hopefully, I've explained the situation clearly and in understandable English. However, there has been quite a lot of political language, so I really recommend listening again or searching for articles yourself. The situation in Myanmar has been in the news all week, and I guess it will continue over the next few months. And even if it doesn't, coups, revolutions happen all the time in international politics. So it is definitely some vocabulary worth practicing and remembering. Myanmar has undergone a coup and the military is now in charge. Many of the country's leaders have also been arrested, and the future for democracy looks bleak. What will happen next is a complete guess. What do you think will happen in the future? Has this news been reported in your country? And if so, is it a positive reaction or a negative reaction to the coup? I know stories in China, Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia, Vietnam have been quite different to the reaction in the USA and Europe. Why do you think that the military in Myanmar is anti-democracy, or at least anti-Miss Suu Kyi? Thank you for listening to today's episode of Thinking in English. Please share with your friends, check out our social media links in the description, and send us a message. We really appreciate all of your feedback. And if you have any ideas for topics or future podcast guests or any other learning format, please let us know. And please leave me a rating. We're now on Instagram. I'm sure you've already seen it, but go there, check it out. Lots of good content about vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar. And Instagram is a great way to contact me. It's Thinking in English Podcast on Instagram, or the link is in the description. Also, all of the transcripts of the podcast are now available on the Thinking in English blog. Vocabulary list, comprehension questions, and all of the articles are there for you to read. That link is also in the description, so please check it out too. Thank you, and see you next time.